Good question. I gotta ask. That's
a very good question. He's got an annex. All right, good morning. 9 a.m. Tuesday, December 10th, Beach Preservation Ad Hoc Committee meeting. I'd like to call the meeting to order and acknowledge that the press and public have been duly notified of the meeting in accordance with the Freedom of Information Act. Full house today, so what I'd like to do right off the bat is walk through our grid. I know last time whoever was here got to vote, but I'd love to just get everybody's voice on this grid because this will be kind of the main piece going up to council. So we've, I think, beat to death all of these items on the grid, so I'd really just love to run through it with a yes/no vote and just so we can capture where the mark needs to go, if you will. If we need to have discussion, sorry.
Oh, I see Katie. She have a copy.
Oh.
She got one right here. She's electronic. She's the only, she's the environmental liaison, Scott.
I don't have glasses.
Yeah, no kidding. And then we'll run through a couple of financial pieces that Desiree and Douglas added to the packet. Is that fair? So let's just jump in if we can. So again, I know some of you guys weren't here last week and we dwindled as the meeting went. So since we've got a full house, I just thought we'd run through it again. So the first item, establish a minimum healthy beach profile per figure 5, which is in Stephen's report. 600 cubic yards per foot in the unstabilized zones, 380 cubic yards per foot elsewhere on the beach. And I think we had full consensus on that, but everybody agree with that one?
Yes.
All right. Establish triggers for when council should consider authorizing construction of mid-scale and large-scale projects. Everybody good with that? Triggers we can look at in a moment.
Yes.
All good. Consider becoming U.S. Army Corps of Engineers Managed Beach. As you know, we've got the request in on that already. Is everybody still good with pursuing that down a path?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes, but with the caveat of what steps are we going to take in parallel to core so that we don't, I mean, my concern all along has been that we spend all this money and then we have one or two people that don't want to sign
Or the easement piece,
and
yeah.
then we're stuck. So that would be, I would just like to say that if we're going to do that, we have to do the homework on our side.
So in other words, consider it, but not rely on it happening?
Yeah,
Okay.
or make sure, at least do as much as we can from our
On
side.
the front end.
To say that if we get this, if we get it from the government side, that we have our ducks in a row. Our citizens in a row is probably a better way of putting it.
Yeah, I would just echo that based off the experience in some of the other communities. Until you actually have a core project in place, proceed ahead as if you're doing it independently. Because there's just so many questions with easements and schedules and bids and funding that I've just seen over and over again that they say, yeah, we're going to be here in 1 year, and it's 5-6 years later before, and they're still not pumping sand. So.
Katie, part of your concern is the $3 million price tag.
For just the study.
Just, yeah. I would hate to spend that money
For nothing.
and then find out, oh,
It'll
sorry,
wall.
we can't do this.
So maybe a recommendation, we can add a note to this item to say, consider requirements of easements, the feasibility study, and maybe keep that in mind, top of mind for folks as we,
Instead of
council
just having it as
evaluates
a-
And the
it.
description a little?
Yeah,
Expanded.
That's fine.
okay.
And I think the group always considered this as kind of an insurance policy, not the only thing you're gonna do, but one of many things, so maybe just a note is, consider
Belt and
becoming
suspenders.
Yeah.
Yeah.
as an insurance
Yeah.
policy or.
And where we can. All right, this next one we broke into 2 different pieces based on our conversation last time. First is repeal ordinance prohibiting hard erosion control structures 250 feet of mean high water. All those in favor, we're going to do show of hands on this one because I know we're going to be in the middle. All those in favor of that?
It might be helpful with this one because people that weren't here Cindy eloquently kind of explained what the ordinance was created for and how that's changed. And maybe she can, if somebody isn't aware, because it looks different until you get the explanation. And if everybody's seen it or heard it, then that's different. But if they haven't, maybe she can explain the thought process behind it.
Well, I think there's alternative thought processes, but
There are-
it's really 250 or not. I mean, that's really the issue.
Well, this is repeal.
This is the repeal it, right.
Right, so it's different than.
It is, but the next one's going to take the modify it. I mean, if you want the history again, we can do it. I mean, all we're voting on is up or down.
think
I think we're all aware.
that was 4 to 7, which is different numbers, but the same category.
Correct.
General agreement.
Yeah.
right.
So the
Well, I
next,
mean, that, it's something that has to be voted on by council anyway, so.
absolutely. This
I
is
mean,
just
I guess
recommendation
This is
up.
what the recommendation.
Then, you know, if that's something that at least some people would like to go to council, then it should go to council. I mean,
All
that's,
this has to go to council.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess my point is, this is not, from my perspective, this is not a vote to actually do it. but
Absolutely.
To give the discussion to council, so
Point well taken.
I think that's another, I mean, so I would
Correct.
say go ahead and send it up.
It's going. Next one is modify the ordinance as opposed to repeal. All those in favor of that?
Modify.
Yeah. Yeah. 3, Douglas.
Yeah, 3 to 7, yeah.
Next one, city performs emergency work, sand scraping, trucking in sand, and/or placement of sandbags. All those in favor of continuing that work, show of hands.
Is that for the current emergency, or is that in perpetuity?
The latter. This is future thinking.
Okay.
So that was also 4 to 7?
Well,
Right.
remember that the conversation around that too is, and.
Scott, if you.
Oh, I think the conversation around that as well was, we were looking at, part of this recommendation is we're going to have clear delineation between where the city stops and where the residents begin. So this isn't a perpetuity of the city's going to do all emergency work, including into the property of the residents. It means that they'll be assisting, or we would be assisting in conjunction with the residents. I think, one of the key points that we wanted to emphasize is that the city is not going to be responsible for all beach renourishment or beach emergency work. There's going to be part of this is a clear delineation. So I don't know if in that context that makes any difference, but
So Scott, and I've heard that talked about, and I know that kind of follows the Folly Beach model.
yes. Yeah.
Folly Beach has a clear delineation at their erosion control devices. Their seawall is the delineating line, or their revetments.
Dune, I think it's the dune line.
Well, the
Whether
dune
you
is,
put a revetment there or not, I think it's the dune line.
but the dune is built over a rock revetment. So I think what you're saying is you kind of have to do that, to be able to really do that, I think you have to kind of also buy into repealing or modifying the ordinance to allow erosion control to really do that. Because otherwise, if you just have a line and the beach is coming and going, we can't really say, okay, go survey the line, see where the repair work's going. If it's on that side of the line, you're going to do it. If it's on this side of the line, we're going to do it.
I think
So they only really works if there's a hard erosion control device in place.
Let's apply it to the situation today, where we have homes right now that are, they had their property line out beyond maybe where the bags and the sand are going today, but the city is taking a responsibility for that. That line may shift outward, so in fact that whether they've got a wall or not, and I think even in the middle of the island where the setback line is today, if there's erosion beyond that and a resident wants to replenish that or protect their property, I think what I'm interpreting is that the city's not necessarily responsible for all that emergency work. We're doing that right now on behalf of,
So you're saying if the beach is beyond 20 feet from your house,
Wherever-
we would
wherever
say
that-
that's not emergency work.
well, it's emergency, but what we might end up doing is we might end up having the resident pay for it or pay for some of that. I think that's what we were talking about. Maybe I'm misinterpreting.
So when are you suggesting a resident would pay for the emergency work?
If it's if they're trying to replenish their property, if it's within their property line.
Well, so all this work is within their
It
property.
could be. Some of that could be. And I think that's where we were trying to get the city out of some of the requirement for relying. Now, this also assumes that in the future, we've gone back to a healthy beach profile and that we're doing maintenance in the effect that if that starts to deplete.
So if
But
all of the
our
work-
emergency situation today is the occurrence because we don't have a healthy beach.
And I think all emergency work
Would
will
be in
always
that
happen
situation.
only in
Exactly.
situations when you don't have a healthy beach.
Just a point of clarification, sorry, the state only allows emergency work when.
Within the 20 feet
Within
or
20
30 feet.
feet. So sandbagging and sand scraping, that's the only time that you can do that. Now, minor beach nourishment can be done at any point under a general permit. So if somebody wants to truck in sand, if the high tide line's, 50 feet out from the property, they can do that. But that's not technically emergency work.
Yeah, and I think like the last conversation, we were trying to distinguish between, we've got this situation now where we're trying to bridge between the year or two, whatever, until we get to the healthy beach profile. At some point, the city can't, I think we determined that the city can't continue to, with an endless funding, do both the emergency work and
Big
replenish.
projects.
Yeah.
But I
So I-
think to that point, emergency work would only be triggered and allowable regardless of who pays for it, if it's within 20 feet. So I think that we need to, maybe the recommendation, and, maybe it's a good thing to keep it vague and have council to expand on it. But I think the question is, once a property or a series of properties have met that emergency condition, who then is responsible for doing the work?
So those parameters need to be defined. I guess they
I
need to be
think so.
defined by council. Okay.
Well, it gets more complicated because there's a difference, and if there were some erosion devices that could be set on the south side, then it would be different than on the north side, because the north side doesn't have room unless we can work with the state and get some permission to put some erosion devices on that side, in which case they could take under the same control and have a certain area that they're gonna be required to protect. So I think, I'm just saying, because it's a little bit different, but I think the idea is the same, which is if we can find a way to let the homeowners protect their homes, then they would be required to protect it for that particular section, and then beyond that would be the city. It's a hard
Yeah,
thing.
and I think your point,
Complicated.
yeah, and your point was, I think I'm arguing against myself on chicken and egg.
So I think I'm hearing you say that you want the city out, but I think you're voting for having the city in on emergency work. And obviously, if it's,
I think there may be
3 to 7 or
circumstances
4 to
where we might
7.
need to jump in.
Right.
Yeah, that's where I'm at, is I think there are going to be certain circumstances where we're going to need to jump in. It's a matter of what are those parameters, we don't have them fully defined yet. So
I'm gonna leave you as a
for-
yes.
Yeah, I'll be a yes.
Okay.
But you're kind of in the same spot, Douglas. Is that where you're headed? Or not necessarily, on where we're voting on this one?
Yeah, it depends.
Middle still.
Yes, you're in the
Still in the
same
middle.
spot if he's saying yes, but his description almost sounded to me like a no, but I'm gonna leave him as a yes.
I'm a yo.
Area.
4 to 7
We're going
probably
slang.
captures that.
Yeah.
but
I like it.
it's Kind of a yo.
And then, Scott, this next one, kind of to your comment, establish property owners' responsibilities for maintaining the dune system within private property, AKA the Folly Beach model. Everybody in favor of that?
Yes.
Scott, that was a yes?
Yes.
Not a yo?
Not a yo.
Next, prohibit construction of new pool seaward of the maximum build line. Everybody in favor of that?
Yes.
Yes.
Tim, good?
What about
Good.
renovating, remodeling, existing?
So we
How's
have
that
we have existing non-conforming
Non-conforming.
statutes that would say if you willingly pull it up,
Strike.
you can't put it back, but
Right.
as long as you're repairing something that's already there.
Kind of like
You
your
can-
grandfather did,
Yeah.
basically.
Say it again, Dan?
Like your grandfather did.
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah.
Like if there's a hurricane, right?
That's correct. But if you willingly go out, you remodel, you redevelop the land, you pull it out, you can't put it back. But if it's an act of God or you're just wanting to repair it, it can stay there.
Good. Good, but
Yeah.
this is an explanation. Next, consider seeking second opinion on emergency protective actions, future beach renourishment program, and other beach protection options.
Me yes on that?
Yes.
I think Stephen was the only no on that one. Just kidding, Stephen. Second opinion's never a bad thing. Next section, proactive response to beach erosion, accelerate and increase frequency of large-scale dredging beach nourishment projects from every 8 years from 10 years to 8 years. Holy cow. Everybody good? I think we've hit that one quite a number of times. Initiate permitting for large-scale nourishment projects 2 years after completion of a large-scale nourishment project. Again, always having a permit in hand. Dan, good? Dan's a yes. Coordinate construction of large-scale nourishment
I
Oops,
thought we
go
could
ahead.
only hold on to those for.
5, with 1 renewable.
so
You
that was-
start 2
Stevens.
So
years
we get
after,
a
it takes
little-
about 2 years to get it.
Oh, so the
and
5
then-
years doesn't start until you get it.
That's right, ma'am.
So that would
Right.
take us, because I was doing the math and I was
Yeah.
like, wait, we're gonna end up at 7 years.
Yeah.
Got it.
And Stephen, is there 1 renewable cycle on that permit, or am I remembering
Any
that wrong?
permit can be extended for another 5 years if you show that you're making progress towards that project. Sitting and waiting for the beach to erode, as long as you're monitoring it, they've kind of said, okay,
That's-
we haven't really run into like, this actually happening, but in theory, yes.
Yeah, the pace of things, I think we're good.
No, the issue you face the longer you go from issuance of a permit, and this happens regardless of an extension, is if there's some new species that occurs in the area or gets listed, then you have to do a reconsultation with Fish and Wildlife or DNR, which may take, 3 to 6 months to do that.
Okay. Next, coordinate construction of large-scale nourishment projects on both unstabilized inlet zones to occur at the same time. I think we've all gotten good with that. Next, hire a full-time employee tasked with overseeing resilience efforts, including beach management. I'm a no,
You're the
that's
only
okay.
one.
I think we have
Do
other,
we get we get a vote?
have other needs, but that's just my opinion. Establish an ongoing beach preservation committee made up of 5 residents and 2 council members. Again, this was kind of after the Edisto. Is that right? Not Fall West, Edisto, right?
I think Edisto, it's mostly residents.
I think it was all residents.
All
on that one,
residents.
yeah.
They
Everybody
had
good?
they had the liaison with the city
Yeah.
administrator or something that went to
They had
the
some-
meetings. And I think our rationale here was it had this is just more redundancy on the council member to be able to make sure we had somebody at the meeting or something.
Well, and some continuity, Scott,
Yeah.
to your point. This knowledge, I mean, think about what we've learned in 11 months. It takes a while to get up to speed. So everybody's good? I'm sorry.
I'd like to see more residents. I mean, that might be too aggressive, but
We usually find that groups larger than 7 lose their efficacy.
Would you want to say that one more time?
I think we've been down that path.
I guess I'm just saying it from an education standpoint, you
Yeah.
know.
Well, they could be, I mean, we don't have to, maybe we want to go into any detail, but, the terms of these roles, so maybe it's a 2-year term, so you get,
Yeah.
constant new participation. I think that would be a good
Well, we
idea.
could leave the numbers.
Staggered terms.
I really like the number, and if more people want to participate, but if these are like voting, decision-making members, I think that 7's about as big as we want
Yeah.
to get it.
You could do 2- and 3-year terms like we do with the Environmental Advisory
So you
Committee.
keep some continuity with it. Everybody's good here? Katie? Kind of. Increase the frequency of beach monitoring surveying from annual to semi-annual. This is
Already
actually
done.
already happened.
Yeah. It's one
So
of
you
those
better
things
be-
that
you
you
better be
write
okay
down
with
so
it.
you can check off.
Yeah, shake that one green. Yeah.
Next, new and consistent funding mechanisms for future needs and projects. Establish separate accounts for 1, emergency beach restoration work, and 2, large-scale beach nourishment projects. Actually, 3, other beach-related projects.
I'm for that.
Yeah, delineate the money.
Next, consider raising revenue to cover proposed proactive beach nourishment schedule. You'll recall the separate funding sheet that we have all the options there. All the head nods.
And one of them, I think, got passed with the parking. Don't know
Oh,
where
the
money's
increase,
gonna-
yes.
I don't know where that
Yeah.
money's going to end up, but
Yes.
at least one of them got implemented.
Mm-hmm. We're trending, Cindy.
We are trending, we are
proactive.
trending to bring in resources for the island.
We are that. Engage state and federal lobbyists/legislators to secure funding for beach nourishment.
Yes.
Yes.
Engage state lobbyists, legislators to amend state law to allow beach nourishment to be added to Municipal Improvements Act to allow city to establish a special purpose tax district.
Yes.
Yes. Engage state lobbyists, legislators to amend state law to provide coastal communities ability and flexibility to raise revenue for beach renourishment, i.e. real estate transfer fees or additional A-tax. Establish a cost-sharing plan with Wild Dunes for projects along areas that do not meet public access requirements based on Wild Dunes contributions to the Beach Preservation Fund. Yes. And with that, Desiree, you want to jump into the the financial pieces we have in the packet.
Well-
Thank you all for doing that.
But before we get into that, I just wanted to expand a little bit on the last recommendation of establishing a cost-sharing plan with Waldoons. I think the last time we discussed this, we talked about wanting to understand what Waldoons' contributions are to the Beach Preservation Fee Fund, particularly, I think more generally on all tourism on the island. So the next two documents in your packet include that. You can see, it's just a quick analysis of the Beach Preservation Fee Fund contributions of inside the gates and outside the gates. And we found that roughly 55% of Beach Preservation Fee Fund, which is 1% of accommodation taxes, so everybody who stays in heads and beds, is what generates that fund. So it's a 55-45 share. So when you look at the funding, the capital planning model, for the Beach Preservation Fee Fund, we applied that same share to the cost share of, between the city and Waldoons, since they contribute roughly 45% of the funding to the Beach Preservation Fee Fund. The city's share towards projects on the north end would be 45%. They would kick in 55. You remember, we started talking about this cost share between 75-25, then 50-50, so we dove into a little bit more deeper analysis of that. The next page, it's an analysis of property taxes outside, inside, and outside the gates. It's always a question we get, so hopefully this is good information. Roughly 60% outside of the Waldoons gates and 40% inside is what generates our property tax revenue.
And those are, again, I mean, that's all listed, but this is residential, commercial, I mean, this is every
Correct.
parcel on the island. Yeah.
Correct. And
This might be a good baseline metric to just start the conversation at council kind of thing, yeah.
Yeah, it's good
And with
data.
Waldoons, yeah.
Yeah.
And then the last couple of pages include, I thought that it would be helpful for us to review the financial model assumptions that we have been talking about and kind of using to build up the capital planning model.
Those are, it starts with
Yes, it
This
starts on
document.
page 38.
the last 6 or 7 pages that are
I
in your
don't want to get
packet.
stuck in anything in the middle. Where you were
Stop.
going, this is- yeah, this is that page.
Nothing to see here, Cindy.
Nothing to see, nothing to see.
Now, everything else is what we've
Yeah,
been
that-
continuing to include in the packet. So the last, I would say, the last 5 pages are new. So we talked about the project timing and frequency, potentially starting in 2026 through 2050 and an 8-year cadence. The project funding type, we're assuming that it's paid with cash. The cost of the project, so when you see the 4 or 5 projects within that 32-year period, we assume that the cost of those is going to be 3% higher every year, just to account for inflation. We're assuming that all other expenditures in the Beach Preservation Fee Fund are also growing at a 3% rate. Our revenue growth rate is assumed at 2% annually. The cost share, as we talked just now, between the city and Waldoons is 55-45. We established a target of $2 million for the fund balance to maintain it over time. We're assuming no state or federal funding grants and no additional city revenue. So the first couple of pages 2 to 4, follow these assumptions. And you can see,
Worst case.
worst case scenario, we're paying cash, we're not getting any grant funding, we're not getting any state funding. You can see on page 2 of the 5, but, you know, after the financial assumptions, model assumptions, page 39 of the packet, you can see all that spelled out, so that doesn't change.
These are the costs right here? Yeah.
Yes, sir. So it starts for project 1, where you look, you know, we're assuming that the breach, it says beach inlet, so
You know,
should be
we know-
breach,
we
you know
know
what we mean.
God, it's being-
We're assuming that first project is gonna be about 5-6 million. The MOBA and DEMO, we're separating so that we can also cost share that with Waldoons if we're doing both at the same time. And then $12 million for the North End project. You can see there, timing would start in 2026. There's no inflated amount for year 1. You see that inflated amount shown on the remaining projects. You can see the cost share between the city and Wild Dunes, grant percentages at 0, the net city funding and the funding type. So that all feeds into the dashboard, which are the next couple pages, where you can see if the city doesn't generate additional money, whether it's through our own revenue sources or through grants or state funding, you can see the outlook and the projections for a fund balance over time, assuming a fund balance of $2 million. So the red shows up anytime you're below that target of $2 million.
Can I ask a quick question, Desiree? On this funding assumption, if I go back to the matrix, where we're talking about, it's recommendation 3, where we've got emergency beach restoration work, large-scale beach renourishment projects, and other related projects. Does this model assumes only the money that's net right now on the beach? In other words, we're counting for all of the other stuff so that there's only a certain amount of money going towards the major projects. Is that
Correct.
correct? Okay.
Correct. All right, so then the second page is just a very helpful dashboard that shows your revenues versus expenditures, capital funding, and your fund balance over time. So it reflects what you're seeing on the first page. And then the page 5 of, or page 42 of the packet, but 5 of the last 5 pages, show the only assumption that was changed for this projection is if the city identified $1 million of additional revenue starting in 2026, growing at a 2% rate starting in 2028. So we're not identifying where that money is coming from, but if the city identifies $1 million more, that is what we're looking at. You can see that the first time when we sort of effectuate the planning model, as you all have recommended, of doing a project every 8 years, starting in 2026, you can see that your fund balance is pretty low. So you can assume that for that first year, you would want to identify more than $1 million so that you don't go close to below your target. But it felt like a reasonable approach, a reasonable perspective of what it could look like. I mean, these are very high-level assumptions, no grants, which we know we hopefully we do get. But at least $1 million of additional revenue, assuming that it grows over time. So that's another assumption that we'd have to monitor. But that's what it would look like. It seems like it could be a manageable path.
So can I make a suggestion that we consider, which is, I think we've gone a long way with this, and we've finally gotten all the votes and addressed what we consider to be the protocol, but we're still missing the partner in so much as we've never, to my knowledge, sat down with Wild Dunes and had them come in to see what we're looking at doing. And obviously, they could be an impediment to it, or maybe they have ideas that we don't on things they can do. Perhaps we invite Terry Hack, or whoever the representative is that's taking over there, to come to the meeting and to kind of share with them what we're looking at before it goes to council, and to get an idea from them if they have anything they're thinking separately they can do to generate money. So I mean, they're in a dire situation, just like the south end of the beach. The condos and the homes are being hit really hard right now, and they depend. It's a resort-owned community with homes, but they depend on the revenues also, and they're going to be they're going to be vastly impacted over the next year or two while we're waiting. So it seems like, I guess not inviting them earlier makes sense, because we first got to figure out what we think is right for the city. But now that we've figured out what we think the parameters are for it, it seems to make sense logically to invite them here and to give them some input. Because if you bring this in front of council and council approves it, and then you go to Wild Dunes afterwards and Wild Dunes says no, it goes back to the same thing Katie said earlier about the Army Corps of Engineers. We spend all this time and effort, and if we try to do it and it doesn't work, it falls apart. So that's my suggestion, is that we invite a representative here to sit in this room with everybody that's worked so hard for the last year, just kind of have an open, candid conversation.
I mean, it feels like a staff level conversation personally, because it's WDCA plus the resort. I mean, it's both pieces.
And we have been having those
Yeah.
conversations with not the resort, but with the community association about, this is what's on the horizon, this is kind of the direction we think we're going. This information about the split is fairly new. I don't know that we've specifically talked about that, but what the number is, I don't know that we've talked about that, but.
I guess the question too, does this need to, I mean, should this go to council first because of the, I mean, everybody's got to get on board with the assumptions or acceptance of the assumptions. And then secondly, we're talking like a 30-year horizon here. I don't know if Wild Dunes or even the city wants to do this project by project on the splits, or if they want it and reevaluate or commit to a 30-year, might be, that's something that I think council's going to have to get on board with. Are there, and, if there are other criteria or other variables that might have to go into that decision to, to accept that split at a council level, and then maybe have that conversation with.
Who holds the checkbook at Wild Dunes? If we, we have 45% written in here.
It's the Wild Dunes Community Association. The resort is a member of the Wild Dunes Community Association.
So if I agree with Dan that, and I'm not saying that we put them on the spot or anything. That this should not be in any way combative or anything like that. I just think it seems awkward that we have this document that claims that Wild Dunes is going to be spending 45% of these really large
55.
items. Sorry, 55. And that
Without speaking to them.
we don't know if they're willing to even come close to that. So I don't know how we can even talk about this if we don't know that it's possible.
And I'm not sure.
And I'm not saying they should have to actually agree or sign up, but just as a first step of like, is this something that's, first glance, does this look like it's a possibility, or is this something that absolutely no way,
So with only a few renourishment projects that have taken place, I don't know if there's any real precedent, but there's a little bit, but it seems to me like maybe the resort itself recognizes the problems they're gonna have separate and distinctive from the community association, and maybe that's something they want to do also. That management's changed, as we know, that management's changed, and there's been issues, but everybody's in the same boat right now, and everybody wants to survive.
Well, it might help to share also what's been done historically. We've got different splits that have happened historically, but two of the main contributors to the last couple of renourishment projects have completely dried up, or that's the assumption. So, that could all change if we get funding from somewhere else, or it's going to be a more involved conversation, I think, than saying, hey, do we have it? I think then do we have a deal?
Yeah.
I think we have a good starting
That's
point
just
here.
my take, yeah.
So this is the starting point, right?
Historically, they were, wasn't Wild Dunes contributing even more?
I think the first project was 14%, what the city
The city,
contributed towards the project.
yeah.
And 16% the second project. So this is a much
Yeah, so
better
we're-
split. But at the time, those percentages were low because of the state and FEMA funding that the city received for both projects.
Yeah, and now the city's talking about kicking in 45%. And what were the Wild Dunes contributions during those other projects?
Between 25 and 30 is what I recall, but I think that at that time, so the Beach Preservation Fee Fund was adopted in 2015, so the first year that we received funding was 2016. By the time we did a project in 2018, we had only collected maybe $2 million. So there wasn't enough money in the fund to have a conversation about what an equitable share of that fund would be.
Yeah.
I think we're in a different position now with almost 10 years worth of collecting that money.
And Wild Dunes is in a similar, they did not have a dedicated fund during those last two projects.
Cindy, go ahead.
All I was going to say is, it sounds like a courtesy conversation rather than a decision-making conversation would be really wise. So as
So I
you
think
said,
that's
so nobody's
happened.
surprised.
I mean,
And
that's
to
happened.
make sure
We
that,
meet monthly.
that they know that we've got it could be, right, just letting them know we've made recommendations, they're going to be going to council, we've made certain assumptions, they are assumptions. We would like to have further conversations. So as long as that, I just don't want to go to council and have,
Have them learn it there.
yeah, right,
And
that's just
we've
not the
had-
right place, that's all.
And that's
So
happened.
it
Just
sounds like
that's happened, and I think that we have also shared with them this desire of wanting to understand if there is no additional grant funding and it's the city and them, and, you know, them as an entity of funding these projects, what would be a fair share, recognizing the lack of public access but the fact that they do generate a lot of the funding towards tourism. So there's, whether or not they know it's, you know, I'm not sure we've shared that split, that analysis of the beach preservation fee fund. It's certainly something that will be done, and here's our justification as a starting point, at least.
Yeah.
So you're suggesting that you guys actually work on this when we're not around with you?
This is your swan song today. Well, and I think to Scott's point, to everybody's point, I mean, there are so many assumptions built into this financial model, and it's absolutely worst-case scenario, kind of set aside the Wild Dune split for a second. You know, if we continue to employ our lobbyists, state lobbyists, which we will, we're going to hope something's going to fall out there. We're having conversations, and council needs to discuss and approve or not a federal lobbyist. So you hope there's going to be some fallout there, certainly. You know, we'll continue to beat on an ongoing state-level funding mechanism for beach renourishment. You know, again, I think we're sitting on a worst-case scenario model right now. You know, how hard do you want to really try to solve for 2050 right now? Are we really trying to solve for 2026, you know, somewhere in between, you know, to go pull all our revenue levers that we put on the table, you know, doesn't make a lot of sense right now until we experience this a little bit and see where we're going to get with lobbyists. So I think from a Wild Dune standpoint, those courtesy conversations have been had. They know we're coming back with something. I think what they would tell you, Katie, to your point, it's not sustainable on their end either. You know, the numbers, I mean, they don't generate those kind of revenues at all with what they're doing currently. So you're either up to an assessment, or the resort kicks in something more, Dan, to your conversation. And I think all that conversation needs to happen. And how do you fix it?
You know, the other thing that I don't think we've talked about recently is, you know, whether or not they are considering expanding public access behind the gates and within their community. I mean, that would change. There's a lot that would need to go into that, but that would change the dynamics of whether or not they become eligible for state and federal funding. Right now, they are not. And I think that that's going to be an important conversation for this community to have in council when state and federal funding is available. How will that share work with Wild Dunes?
Yeah, and that does go into the equation, because if
Yeah.
Wild Dunes decides to say, you know what, we're not doing that, then that impacts the splits.
That's
Correct.
Which is, you know, that's their decision, that's fine if that's the way they're
That's a
going.
mouthful of that, yeah.
So if they were to say that they were going to do that, would that put us at 100%?
Well, I think what it means is that if they're giving us, let's say the state and feds are giving us $10 million of funding, then we come up with the split could be completely different, yeah.
But I guess what we're just looking at is 0 state, 0 federal, and 45%, 55. If they had, and that's all because of the fact that they do not have access. So if they gave access, I mean, that would be
Yeah.
a big difference.
That's the basis, you're
That's
right.
the basis.
Yeah.
Well, I don't think the basis of the 45-55 wasn't the public access. So I think if the states, if you move forward with a project and the state has, you know, enough money to cover the full split if the access was there, in its current situation, it's giving the city a break on their cost, but it's not giving Wild Dunes a break on their cost because of the access. If they were open, it gives Wild Dunes a break and the city a break. It's kind of the way I would look at that. I don't know if that,
Yeah.
It all makes
No,
the same
that's-
fund.
yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
yeah.
lots of moving
Fu-
parts.
Future conversation, for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah, and then just, if I remember from the 2007 project, 2008 project, I believe a lot of the individual condo units in Wild Dunes contributed substantially because they were spending hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars
Yeah.
in sandbags at that point. So, you know, it's kind of harsh to say, but the more somebody's affected, the more they're willing to, you know, invest in their property. So if the city, you know, if the city decided, hey, we're just going to be out of the nourishment business altogether, Wild Dunes would be paying 100% of this
Yeah.
because they're not going to let, their entire area fall in.
Well, and Stephen, I think too, in '08, the '08 renourishment, I think the resort contribution was bigger than the 18
Yeah.
piece too.
I
And,
think they were building the hotel
Yeah.
around then, so they were committed to.
yeah.
So what about presenting to council?
That's where I was at.
Okay,
Good segue.
go for it.
Yeah, so I think next is, maybe a little bit of work to do on the presentation piece. We've got it laid out in kind of an executive summary with the grid and all the backup. Stephen, thank you very much, plus our financial advisor model. So thinking about timing, I think January, Desiree, I think the community enrichment is still planning to present their information to council, so that'd be end of the month, and that is going to be meaty. Not needy, meaty. It's like 180
Yeah,
recommendations.
I think
It's,
they're looking now, January or February.
Got it. A little hedging. So I think they have one more meeting today and then
Yes.
next week.
Today or tomorrow?
Yeah, I think it's today.
Today,
yeah.
okay.
So we think about timing of when to bring this to council. I mean, sooner the better, certainly. If they shift to February, I think we do it in January personally.
Yeah, and if that's that big of a presentation, is that something we might want to consider having done at a work, just kind of focused on that topic and?
Yeah,
A
you know,
special meeting?
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, that maybe give it, it's been percolating for a year. I wouldn't mind giving it sort of solo, if we put it on an agenda, it might get, might get slighted on
Yeah.
the timing and the focus. And, I'm not for a lot of more meetings, but I think also the other thing with this, it's kind of a priority for, at least in my mind, we got, I think we got to give the residents assurances that we've got some plan in place to get us to the next big renourishment.
Yeah.
So anyhow, that's just my thought.
Yeah, David came to workshop or council meeting,
He came to the last council.
and gave a 15-minute update on where the community enrichment plan has been. I don't know, I think we shoot for January personally and
Yeah.
on this piece,
Do you have a date?
whatever the last
Do you want to
Monday is.
do a special meeting for just this or the workshop?
Or council meeting.
My suggestion, and I'm not going to be here, but my suggestion would be something informal that allows a little bit of back and forth.
That's,
Or we
makes
have-
me rethink,
I was gonna say, I feel like that's like tomorrow.
yeah.
It's a month, it's a month.
Yeah, but.
Month with a whole
there's
lot of
that whole, like,
holidays
Christmas
and-
and New Year's and all that in between.
In one city
And somebody
administrator
leaving
down.
us and all of that.
Douglas, no offense,
I mean.
Because we have to have a council meeting on the 7th, which is perfunctory and quick. So then we'd do a workshop on the 14th maybe, and
what
a
if we
council
were to
meeting on
move the
28th.
workshop back a week?
Yeah, to the 21st.
I would be out of town.
I am too, actually. That's a great thought, okay.
If we're just in socialization mode, do we need a big presentation?
It's kind of where I am, Scott. It's almost like what David did on the community enrichment, a little bit deeper. Just to bring council along to some extent on what the grid, what y'all did on the first few paragraphs. Here's how many times we've met, here's who we've met with, who is the makeup of because council served nothing other than the revenue side of,
I think the sooner we
this.
get it in the hopper, and the more information we can share about all this, the quicker we can
So
get some.
maybe this is more of a presentation, not a discussion in January.
Yeah.
In January, we present it, and then in February, we have a discussion.
But at the workshop, I can just see council, if we're going through these recommendations, they might want some elaboration on how did we get there. I don't know, I kind of like the informal, but yeah, I'm just saying, I don't know that how elaborate we need to get on a lot of presentation
Yeah.
time, because a lot of the meats sit
Is
right
in the
here on
first
these
3
two pages.
pages, yeah.
But I don't know, I'm just thinking the quicker we can get it in the discussion.
Start
get
the
them
conversation.
talking
So
about
I
it.
was thinking more along the lines of actually going line by line and voting on this stuff, and I don't think we're there.
No,
agreed,
I
yeah.
don't think we're
I
anywhere
think
near
there's
there.
some
Yeah.
ground. I
If
think there's some
If it is
foundation.
just more of a, like,
Yeah, if we spring it on council and have a vote, I mean, I wouldn't want that. I think we ought to give some time
You
to.
have to go through the whole thing
Yeah.
to start, and then go, right, to
'Cause
be
they
able
might-
to appreciate the whole big pictures.
They might want more information, so,
Right.
yeah.
Well, and, you know, just like it happened with this group, there's a couple of hotspots where there is discrepancy and difference of opinions. I mean, I think that maybe the majority of the recommendations are, you know, agreed.
Mom,
Yeah, not controversial, if you will. I mean, you likely council will focus on those same couple of issues, and maybe that's gonna be the next step, is expanding on those.
Yeah, you all were unanimous on all but 2 issues.
Yep. And they're closely related, so
Yeah, they're kind of,
the conversation will be fairly,
There's a couple more we weren't unanimous on. We
Yeah,
were
that's
over
right.
75%.
oh yeah, 6-1, I'm sorry, there's unanimous, but
Okay, Doug, I'm good.
And January's meetings are usually not as heavy with
Agenda-wise,
with
yeah.
agendas, so maybe the workshop agenda for that first initial conversation
is
of
a
walking
start.
through.
I think just, yeah, let's give it
I'd be
a,
a fan
yeah,
of
we
the 14th.
we can.
So, yeah,
I
so
think we
it-
just give it a try and get the topics out there, and we'll,
Yeah.
like we said, we're gonna flush out what's on the council's minds, and I think we all, we'll get a list of follow-ups and,
But-
but get, yeah, sorry. No, it's okay.
So for you,
And I would be happy to come and help if you all,
For
if
you-
you all want
for you
to.
council people, you're signing up
Happy
for.
to-
Don't start that, Desiree.
You know,
It ain't even open. So for you 2 council people, you're talking about a meeting on the 7th, 14th, and 28th, just to kick off. And the 7th, literally, check the
As
box.
long as the
unfortunately.
31st, I can get to the slopes. No.
All right, so let's shoot for the 14th, and we'll do primarily Scott, to your point, the grid. And I think that, the text before it gives a paragraph or 2 of kind of background and who was involved and how many meetings and kind
Are those in
of.
the afternoon usually?
what time?
5.
Yeah, and I'd love to see the residents, do a
Yeah,
lot
and
of, do a lot of the
Who
presentation.
would like to present this?
I vote Cindy. but
Yeah, I think we have somebody other than a council person present it
I'll go with
personally.
Cindy also.
I'm,
Are we
my
unanimous?
shaking voice.
No good
yeah.
deed goes unpunished.
Wait a minute,
I
are we,
would- I
are we
would be
consensus?
happy
or-
to- I would
Unanimous.
love to get together with other residents and all to put, to talk about what we're gonna, yeah,
But what we're going to present is here,
yeah.
right?
Yeah, I'm happy to present it there, but I would love to meet before that with some of, yeah.
For what? Finish that sentence.
We'll make sure that I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing.
Like a dry run it or something?
Dry run it, yeah.
Dry run, it's fine.
I don't think
but
it would, I think
yeah.
it would be nice to see the other residents with Cindy.
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
sure.
yeah,
Obviously,
that's why
it's a-
I'm
it's a
Yeah.
just
team
saying I
effort.
want their
Yeah.
input before, I don't wanna just.
But visually also, I think
Well, I-
it's more impactful.
We
If y'all
got,
can
we got
be
this
there.
decision in before my bid schedule, so I can
That's
bid
okay.
and adjust my schedule
So
by
are y'all,
tomorrow.
are y'all
Yeah,
available
I'll-
next,
Yeah.
Yeah, is everybody?
on the 14th at 5 o'clock?
I can make it work.
I think the only thing that's not included in this packet is the letter that we sent to the Army Corps of Engineers. So we'll include
Add
that.
that as well, that's a good idea.
And if there's anything else that comes up, we'll just create a good packet.
So put the whole packet on council or just the first couple of pages on the 14th?
I would include everything and
everything
just
just
have
like we've
them
done,
digest
But
it
then
after.
focus on them,
Mhm.
okay. Got, good
Even
with
those
that?
pages with the red
Um,
words.
You might, yeah, I was gonna say, you might want to just cull a little bit of it out, just
Some of
that way
them.
we can focus on the big,
Some of the pages with the red.
Some of
yeah,
them
some of the
working.
ones where we still had work in progress
Yeah.
and stuff, but
Oh.
I think
Got it.
I think the reference material, I think Steve's report
Yeah.
is something that's a must-read for all of council, but yeah, maybe leave that out,
We could
yeah,
probably.
or whatever, I don't know.
But
What do we wanna leave out?
Just the working pages, like
That's
on the
right.
red
Oh,
line.
Yeah,
yeah.
because those were still kind
Yeah,
of.
those were guiding
Guiding principles.
guiding principles for.
Really brilliant.
All right, so
Because if
14th,
we put that in there, someone's gonna
Yes.
yeah,
latch on to.
Yeah.
then not
keep
be
it-
able to get off of that page.
Keep it on
Yeah.
point.
Yeah.
Desiree, Douglas, what else? Stephen? Anything else from? We've got Stephen on a council tonight to give a broader general update on what's happening and such.
If there's any recommendation that we missed, I mean, I don't think so, but
We'll let you know.
Let me know.
So will we
Dan
need
will
one
phone
more
in.
time before that presentation? Or are we good?
I think
I'm
we're
just
good.
Curious, okay, all right.
That's just my opinion, yeah,
I think we're good.
Asking the group.
I'm
You
good.
throwing it out there.
That, I mean, this,
I think we've
not
made
to
the
be
decisions.
totally off base, but the work that's being done on Sullivan's and it's someday coming to our island. That's not in any of this anywhere. I mean, because there is the potential that this is going to happen again, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, am I okay to give an update on that? So
If you want to
the,
repeat yourself, that's fine.
Yeah, I
No, for
don't
some
know.
people who might
Maybe
not know.
we can
The more
hold
the
that
better.
for tonight. Just to-
Yeah, just abbreviate.
so that project started very slow. The contractor was moving less than 3,000 yards per day because they were only working daylight hours, and they were struggling to keep enough sand stockpiled in front of the dredge to continuously feed the dredge, so they were kind of starting and stopping a lot. They have since picked up pace a fair amount. They're moving on a good day, I think around 7,000 yards, 8,000 yards a day. They are supposed to be finished with Sullivan's Island around the end of the year. It'll take them about 2 weeks to move the pipe over to Isle of Palms. I just found out this morning that they're now wanting to start towards the north end, so around 9th Avenue or so, and then pull pipe back as they keep pumping out. So we will have so they're looking mid-January to actually start pumping. Over on Sullivan's, it's working fairly well where you see a platform of sand in the area that they're pumping out, but it's pretty localized. And again, Sullivan's is pretty different because it's right on a channel, and you know, it's a different dynamic than the front beach of Isle of Palms. So, but they are able to, you're able to see a product. It's not like they're just pumping and the sand disappears. The dune work, we're finding we need to give them more time to kind of get out ahead to be able to let the contractor load that in trucks and move it without getting in the way. But it's looking good. The material looks good. So it's pretty effective, and we're still planning on doing that.
And Stephen, real quick, the contractor that's doing Sullivan's is the same contractor we're using,
Yeah, they're the ones that were low bid for over here, and it's Collins who did. a lot
assuming
of
we
the-
approve it tonight.
That's
How
right.
about
It's on
that?
the
That's
agenda
right.
for tonight.
Sorry.
And they've built prior dunes here and, you know, did some of the scraping work, so they're very familiar. We will have a pre-construction meeting at some point in the next couple of weeks where Doug and whoever, we can meet out on the beach and kind of help guide where they're going to start placing the sand and access and things like that. But it's very low key as far as the pump. It's one excavator that sits out there and just kind of moves the pipe a little bit. The beach is wide open. I'm not sure if they're going to run the pipe along the dry sand beach. So far, they've had most of it out in the water on Sullivan, so it really hasn't even been a pipe to walk over. But if they do have the pipe on the beach, they'll build ramps over it to let people walk over. But it's a very, very low impact operation. So that's the whole planned project. There is a very good chance that we're going to get an extra 55,000 yards because there's some emergency shoaling in Breach Inlet Channel that they're trying to get a contract for that same company to just move the dredge to the channel, dredge 50,000 yards and put that on IOP as well, which would be great. It'd probably go a little quicker than what they're doing now,
So that would take us to roughly 600,000.
about 550.
Yeah.
I think 500 is.
No, I
where
thought we
they're
were 550 before.
estimating,
Gotcha.
And then they were going to come back and follow up in the next year or two with a full dredging of the intercoastal waterway around Breach. So what they're doing, that 50,000 is kind of a very spot issue that they're going to try to fix immediately. So based on how that works, there's a good chance we'll get some additional sand in the next couple of years. Now, they don't know how much is good sand and how much is mud that needs to go into the areas they're clearing out now. But it looks like, based off the performance of what's going on now, that it's effective and that it could be a long-term, benefit where they're going to continuously add some sand. Can't tell you how much right now, and how often, but probably on the order of every 4 to 5 years, I think is what they dredge that channel at.
Got a
And-
quick question for you. Just to kind of manage expectations, I think a lot of people are looking at those dunes over at Sullivan's, and they're pretty robust. Is that kind of what we're going to see from 9th back down to Breach? That same kind of a that's a lot of volume there, isn't it?
Correct. It's a dune elevation of plus 14 feet NAVD, which is the very healthy size. It's about 15 feet wide at the crest, and then a very generous slope. That slope is probably a little shallower than we want to do it, but that's where Fish and Wildlife says we need to do it for turtles to be able to crawl up and nest. So it will look like a big hill of sand. We have the ability to plant it, and put sand fencing out in front of it at some point, which will obviously make it look a lot more natural, but it will be a very healthy dune. There is a question, because the dunes north of about 7th Avenue and 8th Avenue right now are still recovering, and they look pretty good. There's a lot of wind-blown sand that's not scarped. So there's a balance in how much do we want to bury some of that natural growth, or with this artificial dune, or let nature keep working, because the beach there is in pretty good shape. We want to be sensitive to all the people that we've requested easements from, and make sure that they have a robust dune, but we also don't want to, overdo what nature's already doing for us. So we could, in theory, just put some sand fencing there to kind of encourage additional natural dune growth, but that's kind of a question that we want to answer a little closer to that time.
Well, and think about a piece that Stephen just said. If the Army Corps gets into this cycle of, doing the intercoastal and going straight onto our beaches, I mean, that is a huge piece that's not in our financial assumptions at all. I mean, that is a huge win.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to sound overly optimistic,
No.
but the amount of erosion that we saw in 22 and 23 and into 24 is just unprecedented, north and south into the island. It's over double the amount of loss we've seen in any other year. So it's just atypical of the historical trend. So I'm optimistic that is an outlier, not a new trend, so that would really change the dynamics of the south.
Very much, yeah.
How long would it take for you to determine, is this going to be a new trend, or, I mean,
30 or so years.
oh, wow.
I mean,
And on that side, looking back, yeah.
yeah, I mean, any year you're gaining some information, and looking at north of the pier, the beach is incredibly healthy right now. When I drove it last week, drove the entire island, it looks like there's a lot of sand that is moving towards the south, and I'd love to see that build the beach width over the next 6 months or so. And obviously, the erosion rate at the south end has dramatically reduced over the past 6 months, even 12 months. We're hanging on without having to do a lot of extra work right now.
And for the major beach renourishments, are you confident that we've got enough sand offshore for the next 30 years to be harvesting out there, or is that a?
Yeah, I think for the next 30 years, for sure. There's a lot more sand further out past the state water line at 3 miles that we can start investigating if we have to, but we're looking at a deposit off the North Jetty of Charleston Harbor. It looks like there's a lot of good sand down there that would help the south end, because it's a lot closer to that end. And we're working with SHPO on the Second Stone Fleet situation to try to find additional work, and we've collected a lot of data, and we're working with them to, I think we may have found one additional. There's 2 more out there that if we can locate it, covers all the ones that they know about.
Thanks.
Thanks, Steve.
Yeah, Desiree Douglas, anything else? No, good.
It's been a pleasure.
Oh,
I
hadn't it?
want to thank Desiree
Oh, my gosh.
for all you've done for this group.
Sure.
and
I
the
know.
beach and the island.
City and everything, and Cindy and Dan and Tim and Andrew, thank you all for your efforts. This has been 10,
Is this
11
it?
months? Is it?
This is it.
Is
In
it?
28 meetings or 26
28.
meetings?
Wow, so far.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
So thank you
Andrew
all.
calling in
Yeah.
from Paris?
Yeah.
That's right.
That's
A lot of
dedication.
hotel rooms.
Yeah.
Still get one of those cups, do we?
Train.
No.
Not yet, not yet.
You get you your own special cup, Dan.
Oh, Dan special. All right, so we are 9:58 off record. Amy, thank you.
2 minutes to spare.